Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 7th, 2025. Time to do this all over again, but wrap up the week. And, well, there's plenty going on, so that we can certainly do that. Lots of stories that fell by the wayside. Donald Trump takes off for Mar-a-Lago sex dungeon later on today, but first, a meal, of course. A lunch. It's always a lunch. I always look at his schedule, and his meals are always listed on there. Lunch with Viktor Orban. It is, I like when they do this too. He's going to have lunch with Viktor Orban, so they list it as a bilateral lunch. President Trump participates in a bilateral lunch with the PM of Hungary, and I assume he brings an entourage and they sit on either side there. They also, I find it interesting, are using, I don't think this was the case in other administrations, they use the cabinet room for formal sit-down lunches all the time. Everybody sits on, your country on this side and our country on that side, and I'm going to eat something, and I hope you like ketchup. So we'll see whether he, asks for permission to, or, will you help me sink the boats in the Caribbean and pass the ketchup or something like that, or who knows what else. Our country of the day for invasions, I think, what did we land on? Slovakia, I think. And that would be one way in to Slovakia. Might need to use Hungarian airspace to pull off that invasion. And why not? We're so busy with invasions. Why not throw in another one? Who's going to notice? It sank a 17th boat yesterday in the area of, the northern coast of South America. I don't know whether it was a Caribbean sinking or a Pacific sinking. Either way, of course, still no evidence being offered of anything whatsoever. Who's on the boats, what their names are, what they're doing there, what they're carrying. No proof of any of the claims that are made, but on and on we go with this, and the international community has little choice but to sit by and watch, because there's no telling what the United States will do with Donald Trump at the helm if you were to somehow push back even lightly on this. Let's see. Some interesting photos coming out of the White House in the last day or so, prompting a lot of discussion, including this one I just saw sort of came through at random here, of Trump at his desk yesterday. That's where all the action was yesterday. The photo everyone else is talking about is part of this event too. I don't know what the event was. Actually, I could look it up on the Trump schedule that I've been looking at to find out when he's leaving town and see how they listed it, if it's still on the schedule from Wednesday. Sometimes these things scroll off the page here, but it was Thursday, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it just says it's a meeting, right? The president makes an announcement, full text and analysis. That was an 11 a.m. situation. I don't know what it was. But he had some, members of his cabinet there and some business executives, and he was announcing something about it. And one of the executives, overcome by the fumes of the gold spray paint, presumably, fainted during, Trump's droning on and on. And it presented an interesting photo opportunity. The video is a little bit revealing. Apparently, Dr. Oz was on hand. So he was one of the first to respond. I think everybody felt it was his responsibility. But a couple of the people there noticed that this guy was looking a little woozy. Maybe he said something, and they're asking him, "Are you okay?" And down he goes. And a couple of the people there, elevated his feet and took care of him, first aid style. And then Trump is photographed standing there, facing away from the person who collapsed, as though unconcerned, and with just the blankest, most vacant expression on his face, although that's generally the expression on his face most of the time these days when he's not talking. And it was very interesting to see it circulate. I'm sure that a still photo doesn't capture the moment entirely, but it sort of does seem to capture the moment. I saw Aaron Rupar circulating it, a still video, a still picture, not a video, and saying, just here's a captured moment from the White House, crediting the Getty photographer who took the shot and saying, we're certainly worth 1,000 words. Now, 500 of the words, as I said, 500 of the words are sir, but there are 1,000 words there, and maybe a good couple hundred of very stronglys at some point. And that prompted a lot of discussion, a lot of speculation, just sort of captures the essence of the Trump presidency. Disaster striking in the middle of his staged stupidity, and then, vacantly standing by while others do the work of taking care of this guy. There was another picture I mentioned, the different one that crossed my blue sky transom. Let's see, Wiley Miller has this one. Well, who's Wiley? Wiley, related to the Coyote, probably, but creator of the syndicated comic strip Non Sequitur. Everyone loves comic strips. Well, you better anyway. We love them, and he's commenting, "Hey, that's weird. Absolutely no mention, much less a photo of this in the Washington Post or New York Times front page today." And of course, if this was Joe Biden, it wasn't him standing idly by. It is a picture of him, eyes closed, head back, more or less asleep at the Resolute desk, while his guests in the Oval Office are blathering on. I guess presumably before the other guy passed out, or else they probably would have thought he died in the chair, and they would have to, Dr. Oz would have to revive him with smelling salts. The Oval Office, by the way, now that much more identifiable than ever, not just because it's covered in gold spray-painted doodads, which, by the way, I still maintain not only must be removed for aesthetic purposes when the next occupant moves into the White House, but need to be removed for national security purposes, because I'm telling you there's even odds, and maybe even better than even odds, that those things are full of listening devices and perv cams, and he just thinks that they'll stay up as part of the legacy of the White House after he leaves, and then he'll be using the information gleaned from them for blackmail purposes later on. Anyway, don't let Trump decorate or install anything permanent anywhere where you plan to occupy or spend any time, or he'll be peeping in on you too. So anyway, the Oval Office, as I mentioned, much more identifiable now that they have hung a sign outside of the door to the Oval Office. Was there a door to the Oval Office that goes directly outside? I don't know. I think into the corridor next to the Oval Office and then inside, but they have labeled it now in fancy, ornate script, but in gold print, but seemingly printed on paper, like 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper glued together, patched together to make for bigger print. That says the Oval Office outside the door. And people are speculating, beginning to wonder, are they labeling doors around the White House so that Trump doesn't get lost and lose track of where he is and go into the wrong door? That goes along with the Presidential Walk of Fame that was recently installed in the South Portico, although they got real lettering for that. And then they remember this a couple of weeks ago, they put up pictures of all the presidents. It's interesting. I mean, the Presidential Walk of Fame, so that's going to be pictures of presidents who are famous by virtue of the fact that they were presidents. I guess it isn't like his favorite presidents. It's all the presidents, except, of course, for Joe Biden, where they infamously hung a picture of the auto pen instead of his actual portrait because of how mature and serious the leader of the free world is. Anyway, I thought that was of some interest as well. The guy fainting and getting no attention from Trump is sort of par for the course. And I thought about this yesterday when I heard the news, but of course we weren't on the radio, so you don't know that. I could be lying, but, be very little point in doing that here in this instance. But Scott had the same thought. Wasn't there a famous anecdote of another guy getting in medical trouble in close proximity to Trump and Trump turning away, very purposefully turning away? And he was thinking of the same one I was. And so he sent me this link to Harper's Bazaar, an article they published in October of 2017, and this is the one I was thinking of. Or at least it's the story I'm thinking of. Donald Trump once turned away from an unconscious 80-year-old man. Donald Trump once turned into an unconscious 80-year-old man, but in this case turned away from an unconscious 80-year-old man who had hit his head. And then, of course, the subheader, the pull quote, "Get that blood cleaned up. It's disgusting." I remember this one. Donald Trump's archive interviews with Howard Stern, thank you very much, have revealed a number of embarrassing and horrifying quotes once uttered by the now President of the United States, including his rating of a number of Hollywood actresses. However, the most shocking tale, although I don't know, I'd go back to those and say I think those are shocking tales. The most shocking tale of them all comes from a July 2008 tape in which Trump reveals that he once turned away from an 80-year-old man who had fallen off a stage and hit his head. The story came about as he was discussing his uneasiness for looking at blood, which prompted him to recall the incident. His story makes for uncomfortable reading, so I'll take care of it for you. And the quote is, I was at Mar-a-Lago, and we had this incredible ball, the Red Cross ball in Palm Beach, Florida. This is actually very revealing in a number of ways, this little introduction of the story. And, of course, the reason for tearing down the East Wing of the White House. We've got to have a ballroom. Who has balls? Nobody. Well, he doesn't have any, obviously. But the idea, it's just such an old-fashioned thing. You didn't have a fundraiser for the Red Cross. You had a Red Cross ball. The guy's stuck in the 1880s, much less the 1980s. Anyway, and we had the Marines. And the Marines were there. I'm not really sure why. And it was terrible because all these rich people, they're there to support the Marines. What happened to the Red Cross? They're there to support the Marines, but they're really there to get their picture in the Palm Beach Post. Maybe the most honest thing he has to say about the whole thing. That's his lifestyle, top to bottom. He's a rich person who's really there to get his picture in the Palm Beach Post. And he's criticizing the others. So you have all these really rich people and a man about 80 years old. This is interesting, too. Very wealthy man. A lot of people didn't like him. He fell off the stage. He fell out a window in Kyiv. And interesting, too. How could he not be like? How could it be possible that people don't like him if he's very wealthy? Everyone likes the very wealthy. So what happens is this guy falls off right on his face, hits his head. I thought he died. And you know what I did? I said, "Oh my God, that's disgusting," and I turned away. By the way, remember the guy who can't stand the sight of blood? I turned away. Another person's blood. He fell and he hit his head. It's not, violent murder. Couldn't wait to get his picture taken with his ear allegedly bleeding all over his face. Fight, fight, fight. I love the sight of blood now, all of a sudden. I couldn't, he was right in front of me and I turned away. I didn't want to touch him. He's bleeding all over the place. I felt terrible. Beautiful marble floor. Oh, boy. Into that already. Didn't look like it. It changed color. Became very red. And you have this poor guy, 80 years old, laying on the floor unconscious. And all the rich people are turning away. All of them. Not just him. He died there and it decomposed over the course of the night. Of course, people touched him and did something. Probably some of those very rich people were doctors. But whatever. I doubt the story. I don't care that much, but I love that he turns away to the beautiful marble floor, of course. Anyway, yeah, he felt terrible. Just as he feels terrible about blowing up 17 boats, he doesn't see any of the blood there. That doesn't bother him. And, of course, what kind of marble was it? Was it beautiful enough to be mentioned? I'm not really sure. Bleeding all over the place. I felt terrible. Didn't want to touch it. Okay, sure. What happens is these 10 Marines from the back of the room, they come running forward. They grab him. They put the blood all over the place. It's all over their uniforms. They're taking it. They're swiping it. I guess wiping it. They ran him out. They created a stretcher. They called it a human stretcher where they put their arms out with like 5 guys on each side. I was saying, get that blood cleaned up. It's disgusting. The next day, I forgot to call the man to say, is he okay? It's just not my thing. By the way, this is a man who at some point also said, I went to ground zero. I was clearing the rubble. I was helping to rescue victims. It's very interesting. Can't sign this sight of blood. There's like body parts all over the place. Well, he's lying about that too, of course. But anyway, there you have it. That's the kind of person we're talking about. I got to find a way to get, Scott, should I even put this in my links? You already have this link. I'll just say, go get that link you sent me. There's, I don't know. It'll be a little bit more difficult to transfer. It's on my phone. I had to read it off my phone. So, Trump, he's terrible, and he looks worse than ever as well, and he's falling asleep in meetings, and people are collapsing around him because who knows what they're smelling to overcome. Like, I thought it might be gold paint fumes. That would be generous. Other people had other ideas about what might have knocked him off his feet. And we just don't know. We just don't have enough facts. All right. I did mention that there was another military strike this time so the fact is that it's in the Caribbean, Seth and Keg's Breath, as others call them, laughing about it apparently and sharing the stories about the serious side of it. CNN reports U.S. military strikes another boat in the Caribbean, killing 3. They all seem to be now 3-man crew boats. That's what does everybody remember that first boat had 11 people on it, and they said the reason we sank it and thought it was a drug boat was because it had 11 people, and then every other boat has 2, 3 people. So it makes zero sense. But my guess is that the 11-person one was maybe a migrant boat, and they thought America might not be ready for us shooting migrant boats out of the water. We'll say it's a drug boat, and then now we're committed to going on a drug hunting mission. We should blow up a couple other things that at least are arguably drug boats, even if we don't find any drugs. I don't know what they're doing about that, by the way. If they're loaded for bear with drugs to ferry to the United States, even if it's via Trinidad and Tobago, like some of these things are going to float, I would guess, or you could put some divers in the water or something, come up with some evidence. But since there's never going to be any trial, I guess they're not going to bother with any evidence. The trial might be of the people who did the sinking or ordered the sinking, if you're really lucky, but that's never going to happen. So anyway, that's the story. Clay Wojtek writes the news up for CNN. What can I tell you? It was on Thursday. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced it. He put it on X. Same story as always. The U.S. military has now killed 70 people in 17 strikes that have destroyed 18 boats as part of a campaign, that's interesting, that Washington says is aimed at curtailing the flow of drugs into the United States. There have been 3 survivors of those strikes, 2 of whom were briefly detained by the U.S. Navy before being returned to their home countries. The other is presumed dead after a search by the Mexican Navy. So, not a survivor, but I don't know what to tell you about that one. The Trump administration has told Congress that the U.S. is now in an, quote, armed conflict against drug cartels, maybe, we don't know who they are or whatever, beginning with its first strike on September 2nd, labeling those killed, quote, unlawful combatants, that goes back a ways, and claiming the ability to engage in lethal strikes without judicial review due to a classified Justice Department finding. So, everything's cool. Just to update you on where we stand in evidence-wise, some members of Congress as well as human rights groups have questioned the finding and argued that potential drug traffickers should face prosecution, as had been the policy of interdiction carried out by the U.S. before President Trump took office. The Trump administration has also not provided public evidence of the presence of narcotics on the boats struck, nor their affiliation with drug cartels. The Trump administration has been aggressively trying to link Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro to the drug trade, while accumulating a huge military presence near Caracas, though Venezuela is not known to be a major source of cocaine for the U.S. market, but that's okay because Trump is claiming it's fentanyl anyway. But subtle shift there. He's been screaming that it was fentanyl. If anything, it's cocaine. So slowly but surely his aides are talking more and more about cocaine to the point where CNN just sort of elides the whole thing and goes straight to mention of cocaine. Administration officials told lawmakers on Wednesday that the U.S. is not currently planning to launch strikes inside Venezuela, so I guess they are, and doesn't have a legal justification that would support attacks against any land targets right now, but I don't think they care about that. As CNN previously reported, according to sources familiar with the briefing conducted by Marco Rubio, Hegseth, and an official from the White House's Office of Legal Counsel, lawmakers were told during the classified session, by the way, which lawmakers? Republicans and Republicans only, that the opinion produced by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel to justify strikes against suspected drug boats does not permit strikes inside Venezuela or any other territories. 4 sources said the execute order, not executive, but execute order, as it says here, that launched the U.S. military campaign against suspected drug boats that began in September does not extend to land targets, the briefers said. Officials did not rule out any potential future actions, one of the sources said. So lots of sources. Doesn't tell us very much, but it does tell us a little something, how CNN begins to ignore what I always thought were crucial parts of the picture, like, one, that what happened, there's no mention of fentanyl whatsoever here anymore. They're just brushing that aside. And now I'm curious whether it was a missed typo. Execute order? I don't know. I mean, is that a different kind of an order than an executive order? I mean, they are executing people. So I don't know. It's a little odd, and I'd like some clarification on that. Meanwhile, in other news today having to do with executive action, another round of pardons apparently, and inappropriate pardons at that, are also in the news. I saw that via Blue Sky, people using screenshots of the AP coverage of it, and I wonder, do I have that AP coverage? Because I'd like to maybe read that version of it. But what's going on here, I looked up some local coverage and a Washington Post coverage on this thing. The Washington Post story, the more generalized, I assume. Trump pardons former Tennessee House Speaker, no doubt a Republican, and a top aide who were awaiting prison because, of course, they had been convicted of a felony and were headed to prison. Trump has granted clemency in the opening year of his term to several former elected officials convicted of corruption-related charges, presumably in the hopes that no one will notice it when he does the same for himself or whatever. But, there's very little reason in a just world for any of these things. I'm sure he believes that Democratic presidents have pardoned any Democrats convicted of corruption, except the evidence is in front of you and easily available, and it's not true, but I'm sure he still believes it anyway. Natalie Allison, reporting for the Washington Post, tells us President Donald Trump has pardoned the former Tennessee House Speaker and his former top aide in the state legislature just weeks after they were sentenced to prison in public corruption charges, so they didn't even go. Glenn Casada, ousted from his position as the Republican Speaker of the Tennessee House just months into the job in 2019, received a phone call from Trump on Thursday informing him of the decision, said his attorney, Ed Yarbrough. And I guess before I go any further with this, let me point out, one, again, yes, obviously convicted by a jury of their peers on felony counts and on their way to prison, and interfering once again in the most direct democratic action you can have. Jury, actual normal Americans sitting there considering the evidence and saying whether or not someone is guilty, and the president saying, to hell with you, you're wrong about that. And also of some interest, again, here, Glenn Casada ousted from his position as the Republican Speaker of the Tennessee House. How did that happen? It wasn't because there was a Democratic takeover of the Tennessee House and for partisan reasons they got rid of him. It was Republicans saying, you're too corrupt for us, we're kicking you out. And Trump saying, you're all wrong about that too. You haven't seen anything with respect to corruption. So I'm curious whether we should go any further. This will be a nice general backgrounder, but we probably should give more attention to localized coverage of it. Nashville Banner has more information about this, or their own coverage of it, I guess. And I thought maybe that's a little, closer to home. So maybe they would have more and better and more detailed information, and would have more to say about it. So Why not? The Capital's newspaper, Nashville Banner, presumably. I don't know how many papers they got in Nashville, but these days you can only assume that cities have one paper unless it's New York City. Trump will pardon Quesada, Cawthron, I assume that's how it's spelled or pronounced, Cothren, following convictions in political kickback scheme. The president reportedly called Quesada and Cawthron to offer pardons on Thursday. Sarah Grace Taylor, the local reporter on the scene for this one. President Donald Trump offered full pardons, not commutations of sentence or anything like that. Full pardons to former Tennessee House Speaker Glenn Quesada and his one-time chief of staff, Cade Cawthron, on Thursday, effectively undoing their convictions related to a kickback scheme discovered in 2020. The other article had 2019 date, but okay. He was booted in 2019, I guess. According to sources close to the case, Quesada and Cawthron both received calls from Trump on Thursday offering full and unconditional pardons of their conviction on a slew of charges. It is linked here if you want to read that story, including money laundering, that's not a crime, fraud, neither is that, and conspiracy. That's just a hoax. However, paperwork... Hey, time out. Just a second here. Sarah, have you been listening to the show or following me on social media? Paperwork making the pardons official has yet to be filed. That's hilarious. Well, Trump and paperwork. I'm telling you, man, that guy never follows up with anything. I don't think there should be any problem getting that paperwork produced, unlike with other things. But, okay, fine. I just thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, I want to know a little bit about it as we play our outro music for the first break. In this scheme, the pair operated a campaign services company called Phoenix Solutions, and Cawthron posed as Matthew Phoenix. How interesting is that? The non-existent proprietor. So it's a John Barron situation. No wonder there had to be a pardon. Phoenix Solutions then did business with political campaigns and state legislative offices, while Quesada, Cawthron, and then State Representative Robin Smith profited from the company. Now, that happens all the time. That's why Trump thinks it's just a hoax, I guess.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Speaking of Netroots Radio, late update, not late, I'm late in reading the update. Justice has sent the production note on who collapsed in the White House Oval Office yesterday. It was the CEO from Novodisc. I don't know what Novodisc is. I'm going to look it up. I'll read you the story, or at least skim the story so we know who it is. I know the guy's name is Gordon because I saw everybody on video saying, Gordon, are you okay? And he said, no, I'm going to collapse now. I don't think he said anything. He just collapsed. The New York Post is the source of the story that Justice has sent me. And I assume everybody's sorry that we used the New York Post for this, because I'm sure it's everywhere. But that was nearest at hand. Pharma exec. So Novodisc sounds like a pharma company. And I had some inkling that it was health and pharma people. One, because Dr. Oz was there, and two, CEOs were there. And that's his favorite go-to group of people. And by the way, Novodisc, the maker of the anti-fainting medication, Faint Me Not. I don't know. I'm not certain what they do. But I'm sure they're huge and famous, and he's a very wealthy guy. Very wealthy, and he fainted in a very sophisticated way. I guess that the Oval Office collapsed at the press event Thursday afternoon. You know about that. Mehmet Oz was there to rush to his aid. Let's see. Cameras were rolling. Oh, yeah. I forgot. I remember the cameras were rolling, of course, because we saw the pictures. But the video cameras as well. One of the funny things, I don't know, about the way the press operation at the White House, really, this would have happened this way, I think, at any White House. And it was the right thing to do. But it's just so odd. It strikes me as just a weird moment. The guy faints in front of everybody. It's on video. The still photographers are there capturing the picture because it happened right in front of them. And when it does, though, the young women that they have working there as press aides come rushing out, and they stand in the way of the shot and put their hands and arms out and say, "Press, thank you guys, everybody, please, thank you, that's it, that's a what do they say, a lid, to close things out. It's now closed to the press. They declare it closed to the press. There's a shocking news event happening right in front of White House press photographers, and they're like, no, it isn't. Go away. Everybody, thank you. And that's the instructions. They're like Chick-fil-A drive-through people. No matter what you say to them, they have to say, yeah, my pleasure, whatever, to you. Thank you, press. I hate your guts. You're all bastards. The boss says you're criminals. Thank you. Stop taking pictures of this thing that is actually happening. Anyway, it was very odd. So let's see. It was Eli Lilly CEO David Ricks who said to him, "Are you okay? Gordon, you okay?" As the man began to fall over. Oh, yes, right. And then the video feeds are cut. It was happening live on the right-wing TV networks, probably the only people actually covering it live. But and like I said, it's the right thing to do. You don't want to just stand out of the way and say, take pictures of this guy while he's fainting. Okay, fine. Anyway, press out, officials shouted as Trump rose from his seat at the Resolute desk and Oz rushed to help. And they used the infamous photo of everybody else doing something to help the guy and Trump standing there looking bored. So that's why the press out. As the man was helped to the floor, Oz, he was going anyway. Oz, Trump's administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, bent over to check on him. Did they actually say what the event was at any point? Like why they were all there? I don't know. Let's see. He's okay. He felt a bit lightheaded. Online chatter initially claimed the man was Gordon Findlay. Initially. Oh, this is interesting. An executive at Novo Nordisk, which makes Ozempic, and then some other things that I don't know how to pronounce. Oh, I know this one. Wegovy from the television commercial. Same as the Ozempic, essentially different makeup, but same goal. And Rybelsus, is that also now being used as a weight loss thing? I don't know. But the company told the Post that CEO Mike Doustar and Dave Moore, EVP for U.S. operations, were the only two Novo Nordisk reps on hand. And there's a picture of the White House aides frantically putting their hands out, trying to block the view of it's really quite funny. We hope the gentleman who suffered a medical incident is okay, the company said. It was not immediately clear what medical issue caused the participant to collapse, though it is not uncommon for attendees to faint at White House events. What else? Oz, 65, was in the middle of another medical scare this year when his 11-year-old granddaughter fainted during a press event at the White House in April. Something's going on, something in the air, knocking people out, but not affecting Donald Trump somehow, for some strange reason. All right, well, there are reasons for these things happening, but we don't know who they are. The other thing we don't know is who did collapse. I don't understand what the New York Post is trying to tell me here. But the company says are they lying? Like, don't say it was our CEO. Our stock price will go to hell. I really don't know. Very interesting. I'll try and monitor the situation more closely from my in terms of is Justice sending me anything else here? All right. Okay. So far, no additional information. So now I take you back to Nashville, Tennessee, over these latest weird pardons. So we left off saying it was basically a political consulting group started by the guy who is now the ex-speaker of the Tennessee State House and his top aide, and somebody else, State Representative Robin Smith. But interesting that, what's his name, Cade Cawthron. What's the point of naming your kid Cade Cawthron if he's going to fake a different name? I mean, I don't particularly think that sounds like a doofy kid, or maybe a baseball player, but, not a serious dude. But I don't know. So this is interesting too. Like I don't want to do business as Cade Cawthron, either because I'm embarrassed of this stupid name my parents gave me, or I want to try to pull off a crime and not get caught for it. I don't know how that's going to work, given that the reason somebody would hire your political consulting company to do dumb work for them is you're the chief of staff to the House Speaker. That's why they want you to do it. They want to pay you so that you'll be good to them. So why hide your identity? And I guess also interesting is you get to a point where you're a pretty successful guy, I guess, at some level, if you are chief of staff to the speaker in the state legislature, locally, but that's success, right? So anyway, if you are going to be a successful business guy, Cade, and you could make up your own new identity, if you had a secret identity, what would it be? Matthew Phoenix. I guess that is a little childlike, right? A Phoenix, to throw that in there as well. Matthew Phoenix, but okay, sure, whatever. Chad Bowers. I mean, that's essentially what's going on here. I wonder what they used the persona for. Weird. Anyway, after years of investigation and delays, the pair were convicted on a trial this spring and individually sentenced late this summer. Cawthron was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and fined $25,000. Casada was sentenced to 3 years in prison and fined $30,000. Both said they intended to appeal, so why not wait for that? Each sentence was on the lower end of what was possible for their crimes. Really, honestly, when they have a normal pardon attorney, first of all, the pardon attorney says, you don't want to get anywhere near this. This is going to make you look stupid. Don't do it. It's going to make you look incredibly partisan and incredibly petty as well. Besides which, they're appealing the convictions. That the result that bothers you as a partisan might very well be overturned anyway. So just wait for it to play out. No need to pardon them. And in all likelihood, they're not even going to start serving their jail terms until the pardons are over or the appeals are over. So just a dumb thing. And let me also add, the reason that there's no paperwork yet is that because the pardon attorney, even Trump's stupid dumbass pardon attorney, and isn't Ed Martin, is that his name? The wackadoodle that he couldn't install as U.S. attorney in D.C. And boy, have we got a story about that one, about the U.S. attorney lately. But it's not him. But I think he's pardon attorney as well as, special executive appointee for trying to F up Democrats, essentially. And he's driving the Trump, the effort to come up with some trumped up charges to prosecute Letitia James. I don't know whether he's involved in the James Comey one or not. But anyway, you remember, we've read a number of stories about him. So he doesn't really have a normal pardon attorney, but the fact that there's no paperwork tells us that the pardon attorney didn't even do the usual half-assed job that Trump might be demanding of them. Give me a pardon for these guys, because the pardon attorney was probably like, there's an appeal going on. We're not even at a point where a president would step in at this stage of the game. And so Trump must have seen on TV, they got convicted and they're Republicans. I'll do something about that. I hereby announce a pardon. And the paperwork has to catch up. Anyway, where were we? Right. Smith, the fellow Republican and co-conspirator who quickly flipped and became an informant for the FBI when the scheme was discovered, was sentenced last week to 8 months in prison and a $7,500 fine. Notice, I don't see anything about an announcement. If you were wondering, well, if there was a third conspirator, what happened to him? Well, he got convicted. All right, well, where's the pardon for that guy? Well, he flipped and became a witness for the FBI. Well, we don't like that. We're not going to help that guy. And I see nothing about it. Asked if Smith had received a pardon. There you go. Why don't I just read these things? I'm never sure why I intervene on all these things. I'm trying to guess the news. asked if Smith had received a pardon like her former Phoenix Solutions colleagues. Oh, her. Oh, really? Maybe that's another reason not to get a pardon. A source said there was no reason to believe Trump would pardon her because she's a girl. An attorney for Smith did not respond to a request for comment. Tennessee politicos had long speculated about potential pardons for Quesada and or Cothran, as Trump has regularly employed the practice with Republicans for a range of different crimes, any kind of crimes you can get, including, of course, the blanket pardon for those who participated in the January 6th insurrection, nicely worded, and recently a full pardon for former Congressman George Santos. So it's now openly speculated. If I'm going to prison, but I'm a Republican, we can just, there's real reason to believe I'm going to get a presidential pardon. Prominent Republican voice and country music star John Rich also publicly called for Trump to pardon the pair after their convictions this summer. Why? In his bio on the social media website X, Cothran, whose profile picture shows him holding a thumbs up in front of portraits of Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, seemed to predict, or at least manifest, the political intervention. Targeted by Biden's DOJ for standing with Trump, convicted for refusing to break, redeemed by grace, and not done yet, his bio reads, and I guess not. Free to go. The Washington Post coverage of it, is there anything additional that they have? I'm going to sort of scan this thing and figured, I guess it does say that they were due to report to prison later this month, although my guess is they would have filed you have to file your appeal first, and then I guess you could ask for a stay of the prison sentence beginning pending the outcome of the appeal. And, for cases like this, they usually get it, I would think. Anyway, Cothran, by the way, I frequently referred to, this is interesting. I guess you do have to read more than one article on this thing. Well, it's always the case that you should read more than one, but we limited time here. I did notice that it was awkward the way they phrased things about, well, sure, he's the former chief of staff. He's former chief of staff because the guy he was chief of staff to isn't the important guy anymore. But it's more than that. I think he was an ex-chief of staff before they booted his boss out of the job. And I'm not certain why I got that impression reading back, but now I am. Let's look at this. Cothran, who resigned amid allegations of making sexual advances to a state legislative intern. Ha ha! Okay, but that's not the end of the sentence. There's a comma, after which comes the phrase, drug use in the state capitol complex. That's another one. Wait, there's more? No Oxford comma, and sending racist text messages. Now we're beginning to understand why there was a pardon. He was a fraud and was touchy-grabby with the interns and on drugs and sending racist text messages. So that's my kind of guy. We should bring him to the Oval Office so he can faint. Well, that all adds up to receiving a call from Trump informing him of the pardon. Of course, both men had pleaded not guilty to federal charges. By the way, does he get pardoned for the drug usage and sexual advances against interns, or what? A White House official confirmed that Trump had approved the pardons, but the men are awaiting their paperwork as of Thursday evening, Yarbrough said. No comment from Cothran directly. Their pardons are among a series of, at times, controversial clemencies Trump has granted in recent months for former elected officials convicted on corruption charges. There's George Santos, who he said was somewhat of a rogue, of course. Trump also pardoned another Republican Tennessee Politico, although everything has jumped around on the page. Where was his name? Former Tennessee GOP State Senator Brian Kelsey, who had just begun serving his nearly 2-year sentence in a campaign finance fraud scheme. Very similar. Cothran, in particular, had taken to social media since Trump's reelection to claim that he was among the Republicans who have been unfairly targeted by Democrats. That was the claim here. And let's see, the Biden, what is it we got here? The Biden DOJ responded with an armed raid. This is claiming perp walk and suggested sentences exceeding 10 years. Penalties normally reserved for multi-million-dollar fraudsters. The anonymous official for whatever reason, being quoted here by the Washington Post. And that's how this whole thing reached me in the first place, when the AP was saying that they gave over several paragraphs to an anonymous White House official commenting on a pardon. And the very good point being raised by others here, and I should have kept that initial Blue Sky Post at hand. But yeah, it is kind of dumb, like this idea that you can get off the record or background or anonymous comments about somebody. He's in no legal jeopardy whatsoever if he's gotten a pardon. Of course, the paperwork hasn't gone through yet, so who knows? But is this going to be in the Washington Post coverage of it too? Yeah, it is. So I can use this instead. So the White House official who spoke on condition of anonymity because they weren't authorized to speak publicly said the Biden DOJ significantly over-prosecuted the two men, and the net financial loss to the state because of their crimes was low. We only stole a little bit of money from the state. Like, that's legitimately a thing for a defense in the Trump White House. But speaking of significantly over-prosecuting, the other big story of the day that I told you we were going to get over to was sandwich guy Sean Dunn gets a not guilty verdict in his mass murder trial. Mass murder of cold cuts from Subway, of course. Sandwich guy was actually literally on trial for having thrown a sandwich at was it a Border Patrol agent? And the whole world was laughing at the testimony that this agent was essentially forced to give in this trial because it was just so ridiculous. Anyway, not guilty verdict for that one. Lots of great sandwich puns being circulated online. Did my own work in that respect, but no point in repeating all of that. The point is, of course, not guilty. And I did see at least one outlet making the point that this should be, but never will be because we're always too busy with other things, considered a major, major embarrassment for the actual U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, which is just amazing all by itself that they, selected a TV personality, of course, to be the D.C. U.S. Attorney. But that's just, I think it's in a normal person's brain, there would be a moment now for Jeanine Pirro where she says, and maybe privately she's having it, I don't know. Publicly, she'll never show it, but she may also be just drunk the whole time and never have this feeling. But a normal person would say, it's amazing. I know I was a judge in Westchester County. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. It's not a minor jurisdiction or anything, but it's not a top-ranking constitutional job, right? This is from which you would naturally move to U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. But at some point, a normal person is like, maybe that job and the TV job is not real enough, and I can't just move to this high-ranking United States federal constitutional lawyer officialdom and make it work. Maybe I'm just not up to the job. But that will never occur to her, even though the evidence is mounting. So anyway, the Washington Post reported as well, and this passed around online. Jury finds D.C. sandwich guy not guilty of assaulting officer. Sean C. Dunn. I was wondering what the middle initial was. No one told me what Sean Dunn's middle initial was. C stands for cold cuts, by the way. Sean Cold Cuts Dunn beats the rap with a W. But no, Sean C. Dunn admitted he flung the hoagie. That sounds like a bit of a... Is that a euphemism? He flung the hoagie? It's not a very good euphemism if it is, because I can't even imagine what that would be a euphemism for. And it's pretty gross. Hoagie is kind of a gross word. Anyway, Dunn a hero as he flung a hoagie. That also is not in the write-up. Flung the hoagie at a federal agent. His attorneys called it a harmless gesture of protest as Trump commandeered D.C. police. But you should be reminded, and you will be if you read this story, that Pirro insisted on attempting to get a grand jury to indict him on felony assault charges. And I don't know whether they tried with multiple grand juries with this guy or even if that's feasible, because that's something you can even do, but I guess so. But at any rate, he was, at a minimum, he was one of several defendants that grand juries in D.C. refused to indict. Now, why is he on trial? Because at that point, Pirro said, well, okay, we can't indict him on a felony offense, but I can charge him via information with a misdemeanor offense, and we'll go to trial on the misdemeanor offense. And she went ahead and did that, which is awfully stupid. The signal from the grand jury is you're not going to get a conviction here. Just don't do it. But she had no choice because she's an idiot and a Trumper in a Trump administration, and you can't back down. So they went to trial, and they got destroyed, literally laughed at in the courtroom and around the world as the officer who was supposedly the victim of this stupid thing actually testified what happened, and he was a laughingstock. He's a laughingstock inside the Border Patrol. They gave him plush sandwich toys, which I didn't even know they existed. They thought it was ridiculous. They lost. It took about, the jury deliberated long enough for lunch, by the way. Yes, they had to bring in sandwiches, which is amazing. I can't believe that the prosecution allowed that to happen. We're prosecuting them for throwing a sandwich. You're going to bring the weapon in for lunch just to highlight how unserious the charges are? They should have figured out something else. Literally, Your Honor, we object. You can't serve the weapon to the jury and allow and believe that they're going to be able to come to an independent conclusion. Don't remind them. I guess they have no choice. Anyway, so he's not guilty, but it's a huge blow, or should be, in a real world for Jeanine Pirro. An absolute embarrassment in the outcome, an absolute embarrassment as D.C. U.S. Attorney. She's not capable of this job. She's doing it the way Trump wants it, but it makes you look stupider than you actually are, which is amazing because she has always looked a little stupid. Anyway, there you have it. Gave up the cushy Fox News job for becoming a national laughingstock. Fantastic. So there's your headline. Dunn, hero, Pirro, zero. Ta-da! Okay, all done with that story. But it was a fun one, to be sure. Let's see. Other things happening let me catch up with this. We mentioned Tom Kane yesterday in our little banter, me and Greg. And I said something offhandedly, which was correct, but offhandedly about, Tom Kane Sr., the affable seeming middle of the road, old school Republican, not Tom Kane Jr., jerk ass MAGA congressman. And I got a note from our friend, the Good Bill Bar, who I would call him the good Bill Bar anyway, even if there wasn't a bad Bill Bar, but because he's just good. And it sounds nice. It's like a title. The Venerable Bede, right? The Good Bill Bar. Why not? And as it turns out, he didn't take offense because he knows the reality of what Tom Kane Jr. is really about, but he had a story. Now, I have a story, too. I didn't share the story yesterday. I think I may have told it before, possibly, so it'll be a throwback for the rest of you. But he says he met Tom Kane Jr. on a late-night plane flight once, and they talked the whole flight. I didn't get permission whether we can share this thing or not, but how could you be embarrassed by this story? He covers himself beautifully in this and says, basically, they had a chat. I don't want to give away too much, but they had a chat, and he seemed personable. And, he saw him at some point in New Jersey after that, which is interesting all by itself. And there's another angle to that one. But, okay, so they had, as he says, a friendly rapport. Not friends, but a rapport. But now if I saw him, I wouldn't be so friendly. How dare he be so cowardly? He turned a little MAGA on him. And, that will have turned Bill Barr off. It was interesting, because I said, well, that guy's a jerk ass. And somebody else said this story. Well, once upon a time, he wasn't such a jerk ass, but now he is. So we're back on that. And I think we're correct on that. But Tom Kane why do I go back to Tom Kane? Okay, I had a story and I shared it with Bill, and I'll retell it in compact form by just reading my brief description of it, but I may have pointed it out at some point in the past. So I grew up in New Jersey, as you know, and it was in West Orange, New Jersey. Neighboring town is Livingston, New Jersey, and about on the border of West Orange, Livingston. I think he was on the Livingston side of this, was the Kane family home. And I don't think I realized at the time that Tom Kane was, when he was governor. I remembered that he was governor, but I was a kid and I didn't pay attention to such things. And I didn't realize, his family is prominent, wealthy, patrician, and he lives here. I don't think I actually knew that. But I don't think I would have cared about that either. But I had passed the place a number of times riding by in cars, and from the street, you could see that there was some sort of stately mansion probably behind it. But from the street, there was just the stone gateways, the gate posts, and like a long tree-lined drive that I think from the street you couldn't really see what was at the end of this thing. You had to go down it. And one day when I was a kid, I don't know, probably middle school age, and trick-or-treating with friends while we were still doing this stuff, and somebody said, hey, let's go to the Kane mansion. I don't know whether I knew at the time that was the Kane mansion or not. But anyway, I had seen this crazy mansion. Okay, fine. Halloween. Walk down a long, dark driveway, tree line to a creepy old stone mansion. Yeah, let's do it. So we did. And it's like probably a quarter-mile walk down this driveway. And down we went. And anyway, ring the doorbell and figured, 50-50 chance that they're like trick-or-treaters. We don't know. Anyway, very friendly reception area, which I guess was the governor's mom, Mrs. Kane. And in fact, they were ready. But they didn't just leave us on the doorstep. They invited us into the foyer of this mansion. Couldn't tell much about it except that it was, everything you figured it would be from the outside. And she had this silver tray with the candy on it, but she had big like party favor bags prepared with orange and black ribbons and everything, and stuffed with candies and popcorn, which we were like, I think that's really supposed to be on the outs these days. More after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where we left you with a cliffhanger, the important story of the time I went trick-or-treating at the Kane mansion. Tom Kane probably not living there at the time, but his mom still was. And it came up mostly because I had said I would remind everybody that Tom Kane was the one. Tom Kane became famous-ish nationally, regionally, perhaps, for doing a New Jersey tourism commercial in which he delivered in his inimitable style, although I'll try to imitate anyway, in which the tagline was New Jersey and you. For me, New Jersey and you, perfect together. But he, of course, said New Jersey and you, perfect together. And I had mentioned to Bill about that because I was never really 100% sure whether that was a speech impediment for Tom Kane or just a really super patrician accent, because my recollection is that his mom sort of had that too. And again, it didn't really register to me, this is his mom, but it did register afterwards when I said she had popcorn in the thing, and by then in the 1980s, this would already have been on the outs. Like, you don't give kids popcorn. And I think they might even have been popcorn balls, which was definitely on the outs. You were definitely not supposed to do that. But they were still an available Halloween item. And, I think they may have been manufactured. I think they were wrapped in, a Halloween themed wax paper twisted to the sides, and she probably was like, well, they're wrapped, right? You don't want to give unwrapped candy. But popcorn balls, I don't know. By that time, they were problematic. Although we accepted them because what are we going to do? And I don't even know if we ate them. We may have been scared to eat them, but we were probably okay with taking them. But we realized where we were. It's the governor's mother, probably. And, But it's always the ones you least suspect, isn't it? Anyway, I don't know whether I ate those things or not, but there was no razor blade in them, I don't think. Anyway, we had heard from other kids, like, you can go there. And we weren't sure whether they were pulling our legs or not, but we went, and it was a great experience. And for a number of reasons. Aesthetically, it was a great experience. Plus, weird story. So there you go. They took great care to put together these things, but they would do it in patrician style. It's on a platter, a tray to serve and it was a sizable package to take away. So they probably weren't getting a whole lot of visitors, so they thought they maybe could pour it all into the presentation. I don't know what it would cost them. Nothing. I'm sure with this mansion, they could give a crap how much the Halloween candy costs. Anyway, she had said of us, she spoke to us a little bit, and as I recall, she had a little bit of that weird affect to her speech too. I think she said that it was marvelous that we had visited her, but it was sort of like a marvelous. And are you swallowing the L's, or do you have a speech impediment too? Is that a patrician thing? And I was just curious, and I looked up Tom Kane just to say, all right, so was it his mother? I assume it was his mother. She didn't say, I'm the governor's mother or anything like that. But, it must have been, right? So she was there. She was living in the house at the time. So it all checks out. But I was a little bit curious about, his mom and where, what are they like? Why do they have that strange accent? And I looked at the personal life and early life section in Wikipedia for Tom Kane, just to, learn a bit about him. So Kane was born in New York City. New York City? He was the governor of New Jersey. Yeah, true. But here's the thing. Here's why you might confuse it with accent. Born in New York City to a long line of Dutch Americans, like, old-timies, and New Jersey politicians. His mother, as it turns out, her name is Elizabeth Stuyvesant Howard. Hello. So that'll explain some of the, patrician accent. His father, Robert Kane, was a U.S. congressman from 1939 until 1959, before my time, right? Kane's grandfather, Hamilton Fish Kane. Holy crap, Hamilton Fish. Jeez. Hamilton Fish Kane and great-uncle John Kane both served as U.S. senators from New Jersey. His second great-uncle was Hamilton Fish, the regular Hamilton Fish, a U.S. senator, governor of New York, and U.S. Secretary of State. And also there's 19 Hamilton Fishes have been in Congress over the years since the 1700s. Kane is also descended from, where did I tell you I lived? West Orange, next town over, Livingston, New Jersey. Kane is also descended from William Livingston, who was a delegate to the Continental Congress and first governor of New Jersey, and is considered a founding father of New Jersey. So anyway, by the way, lots of hoity-toity schooling. By the way, first went to the Potomac School here in Virginia, McLean, Virginia. So again, that Virginia-New Jersey connection, very strong. As you know, about Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger having switched places. When he reached the fourth grade, he entered the St. Albans School. I think you've all heard of that one. College prep boarding school in Washington, D.C. In 1946, at the age of 11, Kane was enrolled at St. Mark's School, an Episcopalian private school in Southborough, Massachusetts. I don't know. They pronounce that one like that? Southborough. That was the alma mater of his father and his two older brothers. After graduating, he went to Princeton University, back to New Jersey. Anyway, and also some time later on at Columbia University for his MA in history. All very interesting. Goes on to be elected to the New Jersey's General Assembly, moderate Republican, yada, yada. Here's the thing, though. Affable, nice guy. Right? He goes on to serve in the 1976 campaign as Gerald Ford's campaign manager for the state of New Jersey. Both of them eaten by wolves. You know how that story goes. By that point, I'm, politically aware. I know what's going on in the world. I'm like third grade or something like that. But I know who Gerald Ford is, and I'm aware of that. I don't think I was aware of who's his New Jersey campaign manager. But anyway, he then goes on to run for governor in 1977, seeking the Republican nomination. And he doesn't get it, but he also doesn't even get the endorsement of Gerald Ford for that, which is kind of embarrassing and must have stuck in his craw in some way. Anyway, he doesn't go without a job, but these days, or those days back when, and so patrician, middle of the road, old school, moderate Republican ends up that Brendan Byrne, the Democrat, is elected governor, and Byrne puts Kane on the board of the New Jersey Highway Authority. Okay. Well, anyway, he runs for governor again in 1981, and this time he wins. But by the way, so what kind of Republican is he? He's pledging to foster job creation, clean up toxic waste sites, reduce crime, and preserve home rule. So, different kind of Republican back in those days. This time he does get endorsed by Gerald Ford and wins the nomination. Now, like we said, old school, moderate, yada, yada, different kind of guy, but his son turns into a jerk. Well, there's early signs. I guess these patricians are always going to get, if things don't go their way, they're going to get jerky. Anyway, so here's the paragraph that was of interest to me. In the 1981 general election, Kane defeated Democratic Representative Jim Florio, who of course later went on to become governor in his own right anyway, in the closest election in New Jersey gubernatorial history, winning by 1,797 votes. So, population in New Jersey is in, the multiple millions at that point. Probably 6 million, 7 million. So not all voters, of course. So very close, as you can see, though. Now, also, by the way, I'll skip down for a second to the 1985 election. This is interesting for you to be involved in both these. He's wins by the narrowest margin in New Jersey history. In 1985, running for re-election, he wins with the largest margin of victory ever recorded in New Jersey gubernatorial history, 70-29, which was unfortunate because he beat Peter Shapiro, then was the Essex County executive, who I knew and was a nice guy, and it was, terrible for him. Anyway, so the smallest margin of victory and the largest margin of victory. What does that tell us? Nothing. What I'm skipping over here to change your mind about the affable, perfect together Tom Kane is, so he wins against Florio by under 2,000 votes, 1,797 votes. Now, the election, it says here in Wikipedia, was controversial. I don't remember it. The election was controversial due to the involvement, which would be unusual in this, of the Republican National Committee, who appointed a ballot security task force that was alleged to have intimidated voters. 1981. One of Kane's strategists in his 1981 campaign was Roger Stone. Roger Stone, a self-proclaimed GOP hitman. You know who Roger Stone is, of course. And, hey, look, I'm getting a telemarketing call on my phone in the middle of this, and it's probably the guy from Tennessee, now that he's pardoned, figuring he can hit me up for a couple of bucks. Anyway, so I did not know that. I didn't remember that, but it does stand to reason. Like, New Jersey's not a backwater politically, but I'm also remembering a little bit more conservative, but still considered middle of the road, Christy Todd Whitman. And I recall that her election was somewhat controversial too. Was she brought in what was the guy's name that now I'm blanking on his last name, but he too a national, backstabbing hitman for the Republicans. Not Ed Gillespie. Dang. Well, let me see if I can bring it up by Christine Todd Whitman. She was pretty patrician too, I think. Consultant. And let's see. Will it tell me who it was? Probably not. It's just with Ed. That's not going to help me very much. There it is. Ed Rollins. There we are. GOP consultant says he lied about suppressing. Oh, there you go. So he too accused of suppressing the vote and then said, I did. And then
They said, you did? And he said, oh, actually, I was lying about that. GOP consultant said he lied about suppressing black votes. This is a piece from 1993 for some reason, it's Associated Press piece. I don't know why it comes up from the Deseret News, but it does. Republican consultant Ed Rollins testified Friday in November of 1993 that he lied when he said the GOP distributed $500,000 to suppress black voting in the New Jersey gubernatorial election, but the Democratic Party wasn't taking him at his word. Or maybe they were. They were taking him at his earlier word. Rollins, who managed Whitman's comeback victory over Jim Florio. Jim Florio had a long path to the governorship, was grilled all day in a Washington office by lawyers for the Democratic Party. Democrats are suing to overturn the November 2nd election on the basis of Rollins' original claim. Oh, and guess what? This is something. Special counsel to the New Jersey Republican State Committee, who was representing Rollins in that, what do you call it? In that deposition, is Theodore W. Geiser. Is that the guy who is OLC head right now? Why is that? Theodore, we just never mentioned that name. Let's see. Well, there were others, but let me just keep looking this up here. I'm pretty sure we just read his name in another one of the stories that we were discussing the other day, or is at least the last name, was it Geiser? Geisler? Okay. Well, I'm going to have to look up and see whether that is the same person or not. But let me see. Let me look at it this way. I'll Google Office of Legal Counsel, and let's see, DOJ. Can I go to the DOJ page? Will they tell me? Or maybe the Wikipedia page. Oh, okay. Wait a second. Hold on a second. The search page had the name I was looking for. Let me back up. Oh, okay. Different. T. Elliot Geiser. Gaiser. Is that for Thomas Elliot? Okay. So a different guy. I got confused by the similarities of the name. But so the current OLC guy, he doesn't look old enough. But I thought maybe it could be his son, possibly. But no, T. Elliot Geiser, Gaiser. And I was looking at Theodore W. Geiser, Geiser. Different guy. I was like, wow, what a story that'll be if it's actually the same person or same family. But it's not. But there you go. Anyway, as it turns out, both of the more recent affable, middle-of-the-road, friendly, old-school type patrician Republicans turn out to hire Republican consultant killers to obtain the governorship and then install themselves as friendly middle-of-the-roaders. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting story and another road to go down. And it's a good thing for a Friday, if you ask me. Anyway, I had not known about that, about Tom Kean, and now you do. And by the way, he's just basically bumming around New York being a board executive, BORED board, but also on all the boards. You know, that's what rich Republicans end up doing, rich Democrats too. You end up just, being paid to be around saying, I don't know, I'm on the board of this thing. And by the way, not without controversy, as it turns out. So I read through the rest of the Wikipedia thing. So under other work, corporate board memberships, to be expected for a guy like him, I guess. But Kean has served as chairman of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the nation's largest health philanthropy. Very nice. The National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancy. Wonderful. The Carnegie Corporation of New York. Okay. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's nice. Educate America, the National Environmental Education and Training Foundation, Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, and the Newark Alliance. He has also served as a board member for several publicly traded companies, including Aramark. Had to take a quick time out there, but Aramark, United Health Group, Hess Corporation. Oh, I remember the Hess corporate building off of the Turnpike. So easy access for him to get to and from. What else have we here? Hess Corporation, Pepsi Bottling Group, yay, CIT Group, and Franklin Templeton Investment. So very typical. But I did not remember this one either. In 2006, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission began investigating the conduct of United Health Group's management and directors. And the Internal Revenue Service and prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the SDNY, the Sovereign District of New York, subpoenaed documents from the company. The investigations came to light following publication of a series of probing articles in the Wall Street Journal in May of 2006, which reported on the apparent backdating of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stock options by United Health Group's management. Backdating stock options is going to cause some serious problems. That's a major fraud. The backdating allegedly occurred with the knowledge and approval of the directors, including Kane, that nice guy, that honest fellow, who sat on the company's compensation committee during 3 crucial years, according to the Wall Street Journal. Major shareholders filed lawsuits accusing Kane and other directors of failing in their fiduciary duty. Well, there's not much more in the reporting there. I don't know how the outcome of that case went, but something to keep in mind. Corruption gets to everybody eventually. What can I tell you? It's not good, but let's not forget about it either. All right. What other fun things have I got to share with you? There's a number of things. I'm looking at the smaller ones to see. Oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? Let's do this. Can I play this? Do I have it in the big computer? I saw someone talking about this. I have here Blue Sky post from Matt, who posts as Mattomic, get it? Atomic, but Mattomic. I like that. Who notes that I guess Rudy Giuliani, first of all, still alive. Second of all, involved in being an obnoxious a-hole in the wake of the Zoran Mamdani election. I did see someone else post that Giuliani had sent around some sort of online meme after the election saying with a picture of the World Trade Center being knocked down by the planes and saying, New York, you forgot 9/11. Why? Because Zoran Mamdani shares a religion with the people who did that. And so therefore he's a Muslim. And so therefore he did 9/11. And so therefore you forgot 9/11. Never forget. Well, you forgot. You elected a Muslim. I'm really disgusting. But apparently the meme is accompanied by some music, I guess, if you have your speakers on. And as it turns out, Matt notes here, oh my God, the song that Rudy Giuliani used in his anti-Zoran post is effing, I'll clean it up, AI generated. It's a song called September 11th, 2001. And it's from some AI slop factory called The Experience. You need to hear how bad this song is. And I'm trying to figure out a way that I can do that. Can I bring out the song and play it in a way that you'll be able to hear it in a quality way? And I was having difficulty getting this thing to come up on the big screen here, so to speak. Let me open this thing up again because it's really difficult to keep the windows straight here. But in order to do it, I think I have to go to like Apple Music and play the sample of this thing. And in order to get that on the big computer, let me bear with me here while I email it to myself so you can hear this, because this is really something. I've been wondering about AI music, and I've been seeing complaints about it all over the place, but I've never really, I wondered, well, what kind of music would an AI thing make? And the answer is terrible music, but it's more than just regular terrible. So here you go. I guess what you do is you program into an AI, I don't know what, give me a song, write me a song. Maybe you could describe the style you want. You could explain it's a memorial song for 9/11, and I guess you make some suggested lyrics. Write me a song about the poor victims, it's a real thing, of 9/11. Except it's AI slop, which is terrible all by itself, and it destroys the environment and uses up all your electricity and raises your electric rates, all that. In addition to which, is it really likely to have the sensitivity necessary either to, one, write a good, respectful song about the victims of 9/11, and two, have the human intelligence to understand that the song, the product that has come out here is embarrassing and no real musician would ever perform it, and so we shouldn't either. That's what's lacking. Let me play you the preview from Apple Music of The Experience, classified as rock here, although I don't see why. September 11th, 2001, the single.
Airplanes hit a field, the Pentagon, the Twin Towers, World Trade Center. Who were the victims on 9/11?
Wow. Like, oh my God, I'm pausing. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to resume this thing or not because it's just a preview, but I don't, should I be worried about violating the copyright of a non-entity like this? But anyway, I mean, it's schlock no matter how you slice it, but you see that what it is a ballad style. Here, write me a song about 9/11. Okay. Airplanes hit a field, the Pentagon, the Twin Towers, and the backing vocals are World Trade Center. I mean, and then of course, so who are the victims of 9/11? Well, they go ahead and they tell us a little bit about the victims of 9/11. Civilians.
Police, firefighter.
Oh my God. All right. So civilians, police, firefighters, but wait for it. It gets sadder. Regular people. Not just police and firefighters.
Who helped the victim?
Regular people who help the victims. I mean, wow, is this terrible? Anyway, I mean, it was terrible taste for Giuliani to do what he did anyhow. But just, I wanted to, I don't know. Have you experienced AI produced music yet? I know, civilians, you said. More police. Firefighters. It's a chorus. Okay, I think you get the point. If there is one, I that is astonishing that it exists, and the sad thing is that probably by playing that, I maybe generated 1 cent of revenue for the experience. And I guess that's all there is to it, right? You don't have to be embarrassed because it's not you. No one knows who the experience is. It's AI. No work goes into it. But if people play it either by mistake or just at random or because they heard it was the worst thing in the world, you get a penny. And if enough people do it, you make money. And since it didn't cost you anything to make it or any time to do it, it's just money falling out of the sky, I guess. I thought that was interesting. And it's Friday, so I'm allowed to, waste time on things like that. But there's more. There's other stories to get to. We are running up against the break, however, so I'm trying to think. We've got something what I think is available past the firewall. Something new from Steve Vladek commenting on one of the latest from the Supreme Court. Another, as he's counting along here, another instance of the Supreme Court granting emergency relief to the Trump administration, and for no particularly good reason, and in fact for actively bad reasons. And I want to skim over the next, maybe over this break, to see whether it's, decipherable. Sometimes he's a little highfalutin in the language, and see whether it's worth spending our time on. But there's a lot of more court developments that I think we would all benefit from taking a look at before we take off for the weekend. So we're going to try and do that, including some very much more understandable trial court decisions from out of Chicago, where important things are always happening. And what can I tell you? This is what I'll update you with on our way out the door, and then I'll make a quick skim. We'll see what we can pack in. Friday, it's always jam-packed. Who knows what's going to happen by Monday when it's Greg's turn to round things up. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And by the way, in my running around during the break, I did happen to see that I got a source. Now I remember who it was that first pointed out to me the story of these pardons, and did so by pointing out the weirdness of the Associated Press letting a White House official speak anonymously about why Trump pardoned a corrupt Tennessee Republican politician, and to do so for 3 whole paragraphs, apparently, providing the defense that he only got $5,000 from his illegal scheme, which makes it okay in Trump world. That was all from Mark Jacob, a favorite follow of Greg's online, former Metro editor at the Chicago Tribune, you remember, and I think he's quoted him a number of times. And I have found his feed to be useful, helpful, and interesting at all times as well. So you might want to follow along there on Blue Sky. Not Twitter. You'll want to leave there. So let's see. I didn't get a chance to review what Steve Vladeck had for us on the latest out of the Supreme Court. But let me hold on to that and start in the lower courts, I guess. As I mentioned to you, some action in Chicago, and I'm not certain whether it's all happening in front of the same judge or not. But the judge that's had Greg Bovino under her thumb, I guess, although he denies it and is staying away from her courtroom. She wasn't able to enforce the order to make him report to her every day at the end of the day about, how are you complying with my order to stop cracking down on reporters and tear gassing neighborhoods. But he has been back in the courtroom, or back before her via video conference. And a couple of things happening here. First, let me read you from, let's open it up here. And I'm not certain whether I'm just seeing 2 different outlets reporting on different angles of the same proceeding or not. But even so, it's interesting to look at the different headlines that have come out of this. This one from WTTW, which looks to be a PBS station. Is it a Chicago one? Probably. I assume that's why it made it to in front of me, from Heather Cherone, who writes on November 6th, under the headline, Federal Judge Imposes Strict Restrictions on Immigration Agents' Use of Force Against Protesters, Media, and Clergy. And more to the point here, the original headline that attracted my eye, which I guess has since been changed, but is still available in Instapaper, is Federal Judge Says Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino lied about being hit with a rock before deploying tear gas in Chicago. That seems much more poignant and important, and I wonder whether there was pushback inside the organization or what that made them change that headline. The subheader on this piece that I originally put away was Federal Judge Says Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. Well, actually, it's the same thing. Why is that as a subheader? I think that's just weird formatting inside of Instapaper. So never mind that. It now, though, says Federal Judge Imposes Strict Restrictions on Immigration Agents' Use of Force, and that we were aware of. Finding that federal immigration enforcement agents repeatedly use force that, quote, shocks the conscience. That was the headline on the other piece that I had put away, so I guess it's the same proceeding. And that's important. That is a sort of a term of art legally, that there's a signal that normal presumptions of, sometimes state activity, sometimes others, but I guess otherwise maybe possibly protected action or action that gets a certain standard of deference, when it shocks the conscience, shifts the ground underneath the incident under consideration, whatever it may be. But maybe I'll look it up just because I don't want to get another hit on this article. But as I recall from law school, that was a particular phrasing. Yeah, here we go. Well, I don't want to look at the AI overview, but we'll look over here at the Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute entry on shocks the conscience. Shocks the conscience refers to situations that seem grossly unjust to the observer. Courts often use this phrase as a test to determine which situations are so unjust or wrong that the court must intervene. If some event shocks the conscience of the court will look for some remedy to fix the problem. Even if it hasn't been presented to you, they have to go looking for it, or this is their excuse for going to look for it. This is, that's why I bring this up. The shocks the conscience standard is often used by appellate courts to measure the alleged excessiveness of a jury's verdict in an action for damages based on state law. It's not just, like I said, restricted to state action shocking the conscience. A jury verdict in a civil case could shock the conscience and it's a mechanism, but it's a phrase that triggers a particular mechanism for the court for whatever reason. In general, courts would not disturb an award unless the amount was so exorbitant that it shocked the conscience of the court. Where does it come from? I don't know exactly, but the first reference is here to Gasparini versus Center for Humanities Incorporated, a 1996 case in which the Supreme Court reviewed the move from shocks the conscience to deviates materially standard in New York State, while deviates materially standard calls for closer surveillance and shocks the conscience oversight. All right, this may be getting off the topic here, but you get the idea. There's a reason you would use that particular phrase. It doesn't, leave me aghast. That's not the same thing as saying that it shocks the conscience. You're supposed to bring to mind this legal standard. So there you are. Finding that the federal immigration enforcement agents' repeated use of force that shocks the conscience, and then that they lied about their actions, U.S. District Court Judge Sarah Ellis issued a sweeping injunction on Thursday designed to permanently rein in, we think, the agents' use of tear gas, pepper balls, and other crowd control measures. Ellis ruled that there was ample evidence that the federal agents had violated Chicagoans' First Amendment rights to free speech and free assembly to protest what the Trump administration calls Operation Midway Blitz, while also impermissibly preventing the free exercise of religion by targeting members of the clergy with force. The use of force shocks the conscience, Ellis said. This conduct shows no sign of stopping. A spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security vowed to appeal Ellis's order, calling her an activist judge that risks the lives and livelihoods of law enforcement officers. Speaking from the bench from her courtroom at the Dirksen Federal Building in downtown Chicago for nearly 90 minutes, Ellis painstakingly detailed instances across the Chicago area in which Border Patrol agents used force against residents in apparent violation of her temporary restraining order. Never mind their actual First Amendment rights, but not never mind them. But this is the reason she did it. But remember, they're supposed to be operating under a temporary restraining order, and they're just not doing it. So it's not just that they're violating everybody's rights. It's that it's violating everybody's rights. The judge sees it, orders them to stop, and they do it anyway. That's shocking to my conscience all by itself, even if it's fairly commonplace for these guys. The government would have people believe instead that the Chicagoland area is... Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a paragraph of her speech. Despite the violence, Ellis said Chicagoans have shown up for each other. And by the way, they mean here the state violence against the populace. But they have nonetheless shown up for each other as she watched hours of videos showing them exercise their constitutional rights by standing watch to protect the most vulnerable among us. The government would have people believe instead that the Chicagoland area is a vice hold of violence, ransacked by rioters and attacked by agitators. Ellis had a lot of nice alliteration there. Vice hold of violence. Beautiful. Ransacked by rioters, attacked by agitators. Cute. That simply is untrue. And the government's own evidence in this case belies that assertion. Wow. Ellis repeatedly said that federal agents, including Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino, lied about the threat posed by protesters and their conduct in the streets of Chicago. Well, they did. Good. Federal agents indiscriminately, she says, fired tear gas at Chicagoans, tackled them, beat them, struck them with pepper balls, and pointed weapons at them. I find the government's evidence to be simply not credible, Ellis said. There's a lot of deference being chucked overboard here. To begin her order, Ellis read Carl Sandburg's famed poem Chicago in full. Okay. That poem dubbed Chicago the City of Big Shoulders. I'm not familiar with the poem per se, though I've heard the name of the poet naturally, and I know about the saying City of Big Shoulders. Didn't know where it came from. Learned something today. And having answered so, I turn once more to those who sneer at this, my city, and I give them back the sneer, Ellis read, pausing to look at the packed courtroom as she did so. To conclude her order, Ellis quoted John Adams, I've heard of that guy, who wrote to his wife Abigail, heard of her too, in 1775 that, quote, liberty once lost is lost forever, like Mr. Darcy's good opinion, as it happens. Ellis is now the second federal judge in the Northern District of Illinois to find that federal agents have presented unreliable testimony about their actions and the actions of Chicagoans themselves in response to Trump's mass deportation effort. In a separate case challenging Trump's deployment of 700 National Guard troops to Chicago, U.S. District Court Judge April Perry said she found federal officials' assertions that federal agents had been subjected to serious and coordinated violence by protesters, quote, simply unreliable. You can set that to music, too, by the way. But anyway, Robert Palmer can help you out with that one. Just because some people broke the law while protesting the Trump administration does not mean that others lose their constitutional rights, Ellis said. Describing rapid response networks and neighborhood moms as professional agitators shows just how out of touch these agents are and how extreme their views are, Ellis said, referring to the now widespread use of whistles to alert everyone in hearing distance of the presence of federal immigration agents in Chicago. Ellis said that Bovino, the commander of Operation Midway Blitz and the public face of Trump's mass deportation push, repeatedly lied during his deposition. That's bad. You can get charged for that. Bovino admitted during the deposition to lying. This is interesting. He admitted to lying, so I guess he's not. So there you go. You beat the rap. But you lied earlier, so you're in trouble about that one. Bovino admitted during a deposition to lying about whether a rock hit him before he used tear gas on Chicagoans in Little Village last month, Ellis said. In fact, he was not hit by a rock before lobbing a tear gas canister without warning at the crowd, Ellis said. Bovino fired a second canister at the crowd as people fled the area and posed no threat to anyone, Ellis said. I recall reading elsewhere the other day, by the way, that after he was ordered to show up every day, and that part of the order was stayed later on, but after he was ordered to curtail the use or to not use tear gas and other chemical irritants in the indiscriminate manner in which he left the courtroom and was made sure that everybody saw that when he was leaving the courtroom that he had canisters of tear gas like clipped to his tactical vest for quick deployment. And then he put some up on the dashboard of the car when he drove away from it, just to make a show of, I'm going to defy this order. Anyway, in addition, Bovino lied about his conduct outside the Broadview ICE facility, where video shows that he, quote, obviously attacks and tackles a man, Ellis said. But Mr. Bovino, despite watching this video in his deposition, says that he never used force. Ellis said that, that can't stand. The injunction orders federal agents to only use force when it is, quote, objectively necessary to stop an immediate threat of the person causing serious bodily injury or death to another person, and that 2 separate warnings must be given before force is used. Agents are also ordered to wear conspicuous identification in 2 separate places and activate body-worn cameras when engaging in enforcement actions, Ellis said. Ellis held an all-day hearing Wednesday where she heard testimony in the case brought by the Chicago Headline Club, Chicago Newspaper Guild Local 34... how the hell were they? 34071. To say 34071? I don't know. But Local Guild 34071 or 071. Block Club Chicago, another of the organizations testifying, and other media organizations. Nearly a month ago, Ellis prohibited federal agents from deploying tear gas and other weapons against journalists, protesters, and anyone not posing an immediate threat to immigration enforcement agents. Since October 3rd, federal agents have fired tear gas at Chicagoans 7 times, along with pepper balls and other crowd control measures. Federal agents also deployed tear gas against Chicagoans on October 24th. Video captured by body-worn cameras, which she ordered, recorded one agent mocked the crowd as tear gas was deployed, saying twice, "Have fun," and laughing as they fled. The agent then yelled, "Throw another one," and prepared a second canister, according to a filing by attorneys for the plaintiffs. Similarly, one agent told another, "Hey, throw it for fun." Video of both incidents did not capture agents ordering the crowd to disperse or warning that they were going to deploy chemical agents as required by Ellis's order. After those incidents, Ellis ordered Bovino to meet with her every weekday at 6 p.m. to discuss agents' actions in Chicago. An appellate court panel overturned that order, or at least that part of the order, saying that violated the separation of powers. Ellis also ordered Bovino to obtain and wear a body-worn camera. Lawyers for the Trump administration said that he had complied with that order. Attorneys for the plaintiffs told Ellis that federal agents repeatedly and brazenly violated the constitutional rights of protesters and reporters during aggressive immigration raids, which began 2 months ago. It's about their practices targeting journalists, targeting clergy, and people exercising their constitutional rights, said Craig Futterman, an attorney for the media organizations. We have children, parents, and grandparents who will forever be afraid to exercise the very rights that make this country great, assaulted by the very people assigned to protect those freedoms. Remember, we're all supposed to stand up and salute and thank them for their service and give them discounts on Chevys because they protect our freedoms. What if they don't? They should pay more for Chevys, obviously. However, lawyers for the Department of Justice said agents had been prevented from carrying out their orders, and enforcing federal law by protesters. This case addresses to what extent does the freedom of speech protect people throwing rocks, which they weren't, bottles, trespassing, pinning down law enforcement, slashing tires, wielding weapons. Attorney Sarmad Kojasta said, well, that sounds like garbage. And he lost. So that's good news. So that's the latest from the Chicago area. I said there was another report that was similar. I guess now we know it's covering the same stuff. It was, here we are, yes. The use of force shocks the conscience. This was from the Chicago Tribune. I won't read you the whole thing, although I bet they've got some other interesting angle on it. But their headline, the use of force shocks the conscience. Judge issues sweeping injunction on Chicago tactics. And I can't read it to you anyway because a pop-up has gotten in the way and probably means that I'm not going to be able to read you the full story anyway. But there you go. Sweeping injunction on Chicago tactics of immigration agents. Well, thank you, Chicago Tribune. But now that gives us a chance to move on to reading from the more complicated stuff from Steve Vladek. I didn't get a chance to, skim it or anything, but this is usually how we exasperate ourselves at the end of a Friday show, and takes us to a higher level of analysis, but also, of course, a higher level in the courts. What's happening in front of the Supreme Court? Here's the latest. It says, I was impelled to write yet another post, the fourth this week, in response to the Supreme Court's Thursday afternoon ruling in Trump versus Orr, O-R-R, in which the justices, over a dissent from the three Democratic appointees, put back into effect a Trump administration policy that requires all new passports to reflect the bearer's biological sex at birth, even if they are transgender or non-binary. Like, super important, guys. Really? You have to do this? But there's a lot wrapped up in this one. Specifically, as I elaborate upon below, and he does elaborate, the ruling provides an unusually accessible example of two of the problematic moves the majority of the justices keep making with respect to Trump-related emergency applications, and no others, by the way. Other people's emergency applications don't get this treatment or deference. It's one thing, deference for the president, but of course the presumption of regularity is supposed to be gone, but not for these guys. And even so, usually administrations don't bother making emergency applications like this because they know they'll get turned away. The assertion, without any deep analytical support, that the lower court ruling at issue is inflicting irreparable harm on the executive branch, they keep leaning on that. And think about it in this case. What's the irreparable harm of allowing transgender people to have passports that reflect their current gender identity? What harm is there at all to anybody? And the refusal to seriously consider whether that harm is more than outweighed by the harm it would cause to put the blocked policy back into effect. The ruling also includes one of the uglier sentences I've seen a majority of the Supreme Court sign on to in quite some time. Thus, beyond being the 24th consecutive grant of emergency relief to the Trump administration, the cryptic ruling in Orr is a reminder of just how bankrupt the court's proffered justifications are in these cases, both legally and in other ways too. Background, let's do it. The lawsuit in Orr arose out of a new policy the State Department adopted on January 22nd, right away, requiring all passports issued from that date onward to reflect the bearer's biological sex at birth. From 1992 to 2010, the department had allowed individuals who had undergone surgical reassignment to have their passports reflect as much. From 2010 through this year, it allowed individuals to submit a doctor's certification that they had received clinical treatment for gender transition. So that's, I guess, the new-ish twist from 2010. But by the way, this is just a particularly dumb case. And if you present a passport at a border crossing somewhere and you present yourself as, let's say, female, but you were on the date of your birth biologically identified as male, and your passport says you're a male, you're just going to create confusion that's unnecessary and helps no one at the border for the Border Patrol agent. Plus, of course, now that we find out that they're all very often a bunch of bigoted transphobes, that just means they're going to target this person for harassment on top of it all. But that's not even getting past it. What's the point of forcing you to have a passport that's going to create problems and confusion for you rather than identify you quickly and accurately as the person? This is the person bearing the passport. It's a female presenting photo and name, and they're going to be like, great, now we got to figure out why this person's name is Frank and it says M instead of F. Really? What's the irreparable harm of just having it? There's a photo in there so you can match it to the person, right? Duh. Anyway, moving on. The new policy from 2010, if you got a doctor's note, essentially, saying that you're receiving clinical treatment for gender transition, the new policy reverted to the pre-1992 regime based on an executive order President Trump signed, maybe, that described transgender identity as false and corrosive to American society, and which asserted that the policy of the United States is to recognize two sexes, male and female, which it defined based on the sex assigned, quote, at conception, by the way, just to throw an extra fundamentalist twist in there. It's not determined at conception, but maybe chromosome-wise, possibly. Anyway, the policy shift was challenged on both procedural and substantive grounds in federal court in Boston. On April 18th, in a 56-page opinion, the district court granted the plaintiff's request for a preliminary injunction in principal part, concluding that the policy likely violated both statutory procedural requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act, Trump and paperwork, can't do it, and the Paperwork Reduction Act, Trump and paperwork, and the constitutional requirement of equal protection, Trump and the Constitution. That's paperwork, too. As part of its ruling, the court analyzed in detail why enforcement of the policy would cause irreparable harm to 6 of the 7 plaintiffs. More likely irreparable harm than to the government, right? In Judge Kobik's words, if the plaintiffs use passports identifying them by their biological sex at birth, they are likely to experience worsened gender dysphoria, anxiety, and psychological distress. And they will face a greater risk of experiencing harassment and violence. Injuries like these cannot be accurately measured or compensated by money damages or other legal remedies. So that's what's irreparable about it. The district court subsequently granted the plaintiff's motion to certify a class action of those affected by the policy and extended the injunction to cover the class. The way a court would normally work. This is going to be a problem for everybody similarly situated. You don't have to all bring your own suits. The First Circuit, which is still considering the government's appeal and has stayed the briefing deadlines due to the shutdown, declined to stay either the initial ruling or its extension to the class. Like the district court, it devoted at least some of its analysis to the obvious imbalance of the equities. We're running low on time here, but I'm going to try and race through it. In its motion papers, the government mostly describes certain long-term institutional interests of the executive branch that may be harmed if the challenged policy is enjoined. In contrast, based on the named plaintiffs' affidavits and the expert declarations submitted by the plaintiffs, the district court made the factual findings that the plaintiff will suffer a variety of immediate and irreparable harms from the present enforcement of the challenged policy, including a greater risk of experiencing harassment and violence while traveling abroad. The Trump administration then sought a stay from the Supreme Court. On Thursday afternoon, 48 days after the application was filed, the longest to date for any Trump-related application that wasn't argued, the court granted it. The majority's order? Although the court once again did not write a majority opinion, it did write 4 paragraphs, the first of which described the posture and the fourth of which provides the boilerplate language for relief. The heart of the matter is the second and third paragraph, starting with one whopper of a sentence. My emphasis added, the emphasis is here. Displaying passport holders' sex at birth is no more offends equal protection principles than displaying their country of birth. In both cases, the government is merely attesting to a historical fact without subjecting anyone to differential treatment. It's the dumbest thing since the Kavanaugh stop being a brief encounter, right? And on this record, respondents have failed to establish that the government's choice to display biological sex lacks any purpose other than a bare desire to harm a politically unpopular group. Nor are respondents likely to prevail in arguing that the State Department acted arbitrarily and capriciously, You know that phrase, too. By declining to depart from presidential rules that Congress expressly required it to follow. For these reasons, the government is likely to succeed on the merits, and the district court's grant of class-wide relief enjoins enforcement of an executive branch policy with foreign affairs implications concerning a government document. In light of the foregoing, the government will suffer a form of irreparable injury absent a stay. The reason why I thought these two paragraphs deserved a post of their own is because of how perfectly they crystallize much of what has been going on wrong in how the justices in the majority keep justifying grants of emergency relief to the Trump administration. And we won't have time to go into those. I should have known going into a Steve Vladeck article, but they are, to summarize quickly by the topic heads. Problem one, their analysis of irreparable harm, what it means, how they get there. Problem two, inequitably balancing the equities, which is a difficult thing to do when you're talking about equities, making them inequitable. It's a sad situation, and I recommend that you read it over the weekend if you are capable of parsing through this kind of language. It's really well worth our while, but it highlights something that Vladeck has been highlighting for a long time. They keep doing this, and they do it over and over, and not only are they granting emergency relief that no other president has ever been entitled to, but doing it, 24 times, and doing it all on the basis somehow that the government suffers irreparable harm if it just doesn't get its way on something. This is a really stupid and shocking invention, that it has foreign policy implications. Like another country will bomb us if we send them somebody who's transgender. Like, come on. This is just not what this is supposed to mean. So it's happening on all fronts, all over the place. Plenty more that we didn't even get to. We'll see whether this is a weekend of chaos or not. There's a flight involved, so there'll be dumb things said to the press tonight. We'll all have to parse them on Monday, if we even remember what they are, and they aren't buried under an avalanche of other stupid things. But to catch you up and keep you up to date, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy come up next right here on Netroots Radio. Oh, guess what? The 11th Circuit, he says, has smacked down, you'll never believe who, Judge Aileen Cannon for her cover-up of the Trump espionage report.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Much more to come, though, including the tragic story of yet another AI user driven to suicide, convinced by the chatbot they were talking to that it was a good idea. Plus, we got to get caught up on this one. This is going to become a major issue as the FAA starts to clamp down on flights from everywhere to everywhere, rationing travel in the United States. See you next week.